Supreme Court of Appeal is expected to rule on yet another matter involving former President Jacob Zuma. So it will clarify whether a High Court judgment which ruled that Zuma must return to jail should stand. The matter was brought to court following Zuma's release on parole. He was sentenced to prison for 15 months for contempt of court, but spent only 2 months of that sentence behind bars. Let's get you some analysis now. We're joined by Advocate Paul Hoffman, who is a director with Accountability Now. Paul, it's great to see you. Thanks very much indeed for coming on. I mean, the implications, depending on which way this Supreme Court decision goes today, can you outline that for us?
Yes, it's a very interesting case. Thank you for the opportunity, Michelle, and good morning to your viewers as well. The jail sentence of 15 months without the option of a fine and totally unsuspended started in July last year and precipitated a great deal of unrest in the country. The then Commissioner for Correctional Services, a man called Arthur Fraser, who is better known as the head of the Secret Service in South Africa, then intervened in the matter and took it upon himself to give medical parole to Jacob Zuma, who was then a prisoner in his orange overalls in the jail in Eshowe. The ruling, well, that decision was taken on review, and the court found that Arthur Fraser had no business giving medical parole. That is the work of a medical parole board.
Right.
And accordingly, the decision to give medical parole to former President Zuma was invalid and void. And flowing from that, the judge in the High Court, Judge Matonjani, said that Jacob Zuma should go back to jail. That is the decision that is now being determined or adjudicated on appeal by the Supreme Court of Appeal, and we can expect that whoever is unhappy with whatever is handed down in Bloemfontein today will take the matter on further appeal to the Constitutional Court in order to exhaust the legal process thoroughly and let us know definitively, without any more appeals, whether it was correct to set aside the decision of Arthur Fraser, which I think it was, but more interestingly and probably more relevantly at this stage, whether Mr. Zuma should return to jail to serve out the balance of his sentence, or whether, because his medical parole, however invalidly it may have been granted, has run to the end of the 15 months sentence that was imposed on him by the Constitutional Court for being in contempt of its order that he should go to the Zondo Commission and give his version, his evidence to Chief Justice Zondo in the course of that Commission of Inquiry into State Capture. It's difficult to know in advance. I would hate to speculate whether the Supreme Court of Appeal is going to take the easy way out and say, well, this is a very interesting conundrum, but the 15 months have come and gone. The medical parole is a form of punishment. I don't think anybody would, given the choice, I don't think anybody would choose to take orange overalls ahead of the incarceration in the prison. Ahead of the medical parole where you don't stay in a prison. And that is going to be the interesting part of the judgment that we're expecting later this morning.
Of course, it's always interesting in a year like this one, Advocate Hoffman, to think about the political implications, right? Because it's possibly one of the most important periods coming up now with the December elective conference of the ANC. And again, depending on how this decision goes today at the Supreme Court of Appeal, what that means for the governing party and for the former president himself.
Yes. Well, he's put his hand up as a candidate for the chairmanship of the ANC, which seems to suggest that he has recovered from the life-threatening condition that caused his a medical parole to commence. And, of course, he is very much in contestation with President Ramaphosa. I see today on the weekend he made a speech in which he was critical of President Ramaphosa for referring to the duration of his presidency as 9 wasted years. How you get offended by that so long after the event is a little bit difficult to understand, but he was selling books, selling the idea of buying a book by him for Christmas. So President Zuma is certainly, at the age of 80, a political survivor, and he is very much involved in the jockeying for position that precedes every elective conference of the ANC.
Advocate Hoffman, you've also talked about, you've sort of reflected on the judgment in the Constitutional Court that landed the former president up in jail in the first place. That judgment by Justice Sisi Kampepe, who was actually acting Chief Justice at the time, that 15-month jail term without the option of appeal. It was a scathing judgment that to this day, people say it will go down in history, where she says, the Constitutional Court cannot be naive to hope for his cooperation. She's referring to former President Jacob Zuma. He has repeatedly said he would rather be imprisoned. A suspended sentence would prolong his defiance. And it goes on and on. The judgment in itself is incredibly scathing against former President Jacob Zuma. I wondered then whether, even though it was a majority judgment and there was a minority judgment that actually had scathing words for the state capture inquiry for sort of passing the buck, but I wonder whether the former president would want, if today's decision doesn't go his way, would want to then take it, given what the Constitutional Court had to say about him last June, July, whether he'd want to take it further to the Constitutional Court this time.
If the choice is going to jail tomorrow or going to the Constitutional Court yet again next year, I am confident that that choice of Jacob Zuma's will be exercised in favor of going back to the Constitutional Court, even though he has such a bad reputation and has been so severely criticized by that court. It's not the first time he's been criticized by that court. Mm-hmm. You'll remember a few years ago in the Nkandla judgment, he was severely criticized by Chief Justice Mogoeng for the shenanigans that went on around the financing of home improvements at the Nkandla homestead where the Zuma family lives. So it's not a question of thinking that he's going to win in the Constitutional Court. It's a question of kicking the can down the road, or what the lawyers call the Stalingrad strategy that the Zuma legal team has turned into an art form. And there's no doubt in my mind that if the outcome of today is please report to prison tomorrow, he will appeal that decision and take it to the Constitutional Court, even if he thinks that he's going to lose in the Constitutional Court, because it's a way of buying more time.
Advocate Paul Hoffman, let me thank you for your time this morning. A director with Accountability Now. Some analysis for you as the former president heads back to court. Yet again, the Supreme Court of Appeal expected to rule on whether he should indeed return to court, whether that High Court judgment should stand.